Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On this occasion, we will present the results of our group's work, which discusses the theory of Marxian Socialism. The names of our group members are Brilliant Indra Prasa, Fariha Nuraini, and Rika Wahyu Fitriani. For the first is the introduction of the Marxian Socialism theory. The background of the theory of Karl Marx, or what is often called Marxian Socialism, is related to the theory of surplus value. The surplus value theory is based on two value theories proposed by Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Adam Smith's theory of value distinguishes two types of value, namely exchange value and use value. David Ricardo's theory of value is combined with the theory of production results with the awareness of factors such as land, wages, and profits. Next is about the basically of introduction the Marxian Socialism theory. So, Karl Marx theory of value, motivated by his criticism and hatred of capitalist theory or the capitalist by Adam Smith. This criticism was written in a book entitled Das Kapitalist. Marx's theory is called the labor value theory, which is developed into a theory of surplus value. The theory of surplus value explains that the value of a good is determined by the value of the labor sacrificed to produce the goods, as well as the labor contained in the capital and raw materials that are used up. In addition, the more advanced the level of technology, the greater the level of exploitation of workers' lives.
Now we will discuss about main principle of historical school. Main principle of historical school of Marxian Socialism is about power, domination, and exploitation by the capitalist or bourgeois who owns the means of production to detriment of the workers who have nothing but their labor to sell. Marx argued that capitalism is inherently a contradictory system that in time will be collapsed and will be replaced by socialism. The basic principle of Marx's theory, the first is historical materialism. In the materialist interpretation of history, all change in society, including the evolution of social institutions and norms of human behavior, are attributed to the underlying economic condition of society. The second is criticism of capitalism. The Marxist theory severely critiques capitalism as an exploitative economic system. The third is social class. Marxist theory divides the society into social class who are inherently in competition with each other. And the fourth is revolution, socialism, and communism. Marxist theory predicts that ultimately the exploitation of the proletariat will cause them to rise in revolution against the bourgeois. Once the revolution succeeds, capitalism will be abolished. It will be replaced a socialist society where the working class through the state will control the means of production. Central to Marx's socialism were two basic principles, and these two principles of self-emancipation of the democratic workers' state became the very essence of Marxian of socialism from below. Opposition to an economic system based on inequality and on the alienation and exploitation of majority by means of the system of wage labor, a system whose purpose is on to obtain profits from some people rather than satisfying the needs of all. Marx believed that the condition of worker could not be improved as long as profit was accumulated by private capitalists. Workers had to overthrow capitalism and the rule of private property, and workers must construct a radically socialist society where all property was socially controlled. Marx's theory of history. Marx combined Hegel's dialectic with materialism to develop his theory of history. For Marx, history is a process through which the static relation of production or the thesis come into eventual conflict with dynamic forces of production or the antithesis. As a young student, Marx was influenced by G.W.F. Hegel and joined the Young Hegelian in Berlin. Hegel introduced the idea of philosophy of dialectic, which is built upon contradiction in society. Marx refined it and developed his own dialectical materialism that views history as a determinant of social relation and social institution of society. History is set into motion on the basis of needs, which satisfy and produce more needs. Human nature is even shaped by history, which is predicated on fulfillment of material needs. Social evolution states Marx society evolving through 6 stages. Marx explained how feudalism will tend to give way to capitalism and how capitalism will give way to socialism. Marx's conclusion system from his labor theory of value and from his perception of the role of profit in a capitalist economy. The law of motion of capitalist society. Marx used 6 important interrelated concepts to construct his theory of capitalism. Then the first is the labor theory of value. In Marx's analysis of commodities in a capitalist society, a commodity has use value or utility and exchange value based on the average labor time required in production. For Marx, labor time determines absolute value as opposite to Ricardo, who believed the relative value of different goods were proportional to the labor time embodied in each. If in Marx's version of the labor theory, all value is created by labor, the owner of capital goods would have no claim to any of product. Karl Marx further argued that the cost of labor power is the total hours and cost society bears to allow the worker with the necessary capacity to work, for example, including feeding workers. Marx concluded that the wage of workers should be directly proportional to the labor power of the worker. The concept of labor power gave rise to Marx's questioning of the distribution of surplus value in capitalist society. He argued that capitalists overwork employees to achieve profits, resulting in the employees producing more value than what they are being compensated for. The theory of exploitation. The exploitation in this theory shows the workers work more than normal working hours and do not get the wage they deserve. Surplus value. The exploitation of worker in the exploitation of surplus value by capitalists cannot occur when the productivity of labor is so low that the worker have to consume goods equivalent in the value to their own output in order to survive. And the rate of surplus value, which is S, is surplus value, that is extra value a labor produced without comparison by capitalists, and V is variable capital such as total cost. And the rate of profit in Marx's formulation is the ratio of surplus value to the total capital invested. The rate of profit is how much profit the capitalists earn depending on the surplus value is given in equation 10.2. That is S is surplus value, C is constant capital, and V is variable capital.
Okay, now we move to the capital accumulation and the falling rate of profit. According to Marx, the rate of profit in previous equation received by capitalists will tend to fall over the long run. The reason is the drive toward increasing efficiency through mechanization and labor-saving invention. The rises what Marxists call the organic composition of capital, that's shown as Q in the equation at this slide. The formula of organic composition of capital, or Q, is constant capital divided by constant capital plus variable cost, or total capital. As for the alternative profit rate equation in the middle of this slide, this equation indicates that the rate of profit, P accent, varies directly with the rate of surplus value, or S accent, and inversely with the organic composition of capital, or Q. Therefore, as capitalists invest relatively more in machinery and less in labor power, that will rise Q and P accent will fall. The drive toward the use of more capital reduce the rate of profit. It means that laborers are the source of all value, including surplus value, and relatively fewer workers are used, so the profit rate will fall. The next slide is about the 6 important interrelated concepts. In this slide, we have 2 points. The first is the centralization of capital, and the second is concentration of wealth and class conflict. First, we will talk about the centralization of capital. The surplus value squeezed out of the productive worker causes an accumulation of capital, which leads to overproduction since the worker cannot and the capitalist will not buy the flood of consumer goods produced. The second is the concentration of wealth and class conflict. The concentration of wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer capitalists and the absolute and relative impoverishment of the worker together set the stage for class conflict. The growing of misery, oppression, slavery, degradation, exploitation of the worker raised their sense of solidarity and will to revolt. Now we arrive at the major contribution of Marx to the economic theory. So Marx contribute a lot to the economic theory. What is the contribution? The first contribution is that Marx was an important participant in the struggle to establish a suitable theory of value in economics. Second is that Marx was one of the first economists to note that business cycles are a normal assurance in capitalist economies. And the next contribution is that Marx accurately predicted the growth of large-scale enterprises and monopoly power. The fourth is Marx highlight the substitute effect as it applies to labor-saving capital. And the last but not least is that Marx contribute to economics through his emphasis on dynamic rather than static analysis.
Next is the founder of Marxian Socialism theory. His name is Karl Heinrich Marx, or you can call Karl Marx. Karl Marx was born on May 5, 1818 in Trier-Rhine province, Prussia, Germany, and died on March 14, 1883 in London. He comes from a Jewish family. Marx initially attended the University of Bonn to study law, but due to change in behavior, he was transferred to the University of Berlin in the Department of Philosophy. In 1864, however, he helped found the International Workers' Association, known as the First International, and in 1867, Marx published the first volume of Capital or Das Kapital, his major work on economic theory. So the next is the forerunners and collaborator with Karl Marx about the Marxian Socialism theory. His name is Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels was born in Barmen of the Rhine province, Prussia, Germany. He died on 5 August 1895 in London, England. Friedrich Engels was a collaborator of Karl Marx on the foundation of modern communism. Friedrich Engels grew up in a family environment with moderate liberal political views, from allegiance to Germany and his Protestant beliefs. Engels tended to oppose his family customs. After that, he finally decided to go to school and spent 3 years, 1838 until 1841, getting a practical business office of an export company. Next is the timeline of development theory with Friedrich Engels. Start after leaving the Doctor Club in 1842. Engels met Moses Hess. The man was able to change his views to become a communist. 1842 until 1844, functioned as an entrepreneur. In 1844, he contributed to articles to the Dutch Französische Diaboute, edited by Marx in Paris. 1845, Engels published The Condition of the Working Class in England. 1847, Engels and Marx attempt to transform their transformation into the Communist League. The revolution in 1848, which was triggered by the German state to throw the authoritarian political system into a constitutional representation toward the Communist League, which Marx and Engels want to achieve. Next, it's 1851 until 1852. Engels wrote the article that appeared in the New York Tribune under the name Marx, and were later published under Engels' name as Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Germany in 1848. In the informal division of labor funded by the two main features of communism, Engels was a specialist in national affairs, military matters, to some extent in international affairs and in science. Marx also turned to him repeatedly to clarification of economic equation, especially for information of business practices and industrial operations. Marx's Capital, his most important work, contains particularly Manchester-made postage stamps. Marx also requests Engels writing facilities to help popularize their common view. While Marx was the pair's brilliant theorist, Engels is a punctual seller of Marxism. Draw attention to this Capital through his commentary on the book, which instilled the idea that it was their holy book. Engels wrote almost alone her Eugene Uring's Umwälzung der Wissenschaft, 1878, her Eugene Uring's Revolution in Science, better known as Andy Uring's, the book that perhaps most promote Marxian thought. This destroyed the influence of Carl Eugene Uring, a brilliant professor who tried to replace Marx in German Social Democrats. So the next is about the conclusion of the Marxian Socialism theory. There are several criticisms of the Marxian Socialism school of thought. First, the class structure today is more complex than that of the bourgeois proletariat. 2. Capitalism today is less exploitative. 3. Marx argues that the capitalists who control the economic base control the economic superstructure, yet many of our institutions today have at least relative autonomy from bourgeois control quite clear. 4. Much less alienation in modern companies. 5. Classic Marxist theory has been criticized for being economically deterministic. 6. The Communist Revolution in Eastern Europe did not lead to the greater equality and freedom that Marx hoped. Given the failure at communism, it is difficult to see what the alternatives to capitalism are. So the next is limitation of Marxian Socialism. There are 4 limitations of Marxian Socialism. First, the wages paid to workers tend toward the cultural subsistence because of the presence of a large reserve army of the unemployment. 2. Contemporary economists argue that workers are the source of all action value. Number 3. Marx's prediction about the inevitability of class conflict rests on his theory of the exploitation and accumulation of capital, which has recently led to falling rates of profit, worsening crisis, and technological unemployment. Number 4. Marx believed that the accumulation of capital led to a fall in the rate of profit, exacerbating business crisis and technological unemployment. The last is about the relevance of Marxian Socialism theory. This Marxian Socialism theory can be said to be not entirely relevant if it's used at its time. This is reported by a critic of the theory previously mentioned. One example of the irrelevance of this Marxian Socialism theory is the class structure, which is much more complex than that of the bourgeois proletariat. A large number of middle class people in the middle of the social class become the answer if a more complex structure has occurred. Moreover, many sociologists today will argue that Marx's grand theory of the world is no longer relevant. Rather than researching to creating a perfect society, we must focus our attention on a much more specific and localized social problem. Enough of the presentations from our group. Apologies for the mistakes and lack of word. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.